And then basically, because we don't have standards, and this is what I want to say, because we don't have standards, monetization gets a lot harder. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is that last year I interviewed Brightroll, and the CEO, Todd, I forgot his last name, Sarandati, and asked him why video ads were becoming so profitable for him and his platform. And he said to me that part of the reason for that was that the Internet Advertising Bureau's vast video ad display template standards had enabled end-to-end control between publishers and the ad serving platforms. Who knew? On my time on the board of directors of the Web Analytics Association, we had started a social media committee, and we couldn't really get vendors to be wanting to sit down at the same table. I think that's beginning to happen in the UK with the Certified Institute of Public Relations study group, which I'm part of and which Luke is part of. But I think basically there isn't any standards, right? And so the monetization that everyone's looking for here, number one, would be helped by standards. Even though it may interfere with the creativity of some of the vendors, the overall benefit of it would actually, in the end, would be in the interest of all the vendors, if they would actually, all the surviving vendors, I would say, if they would agree on this. So I wanted just to talk about the fact that stuff like this was out there, but that also it didn't really help. Because when I took this data, when I try to do share of voice, and I used an example like Havana Central, this restaurant chain I've done a lot of work with this year, I started to realize that whoever put this together didn't really touch the data. They didn't really look at the data. They didn't see and try to apply it to enough different use cases to see, is this actually workable? And when I tried to do it with Havana Central, I saw, first of all, they're a local business chain, and they thought their competitors were, Domino's and, some of the bigger things, and that didn't work, So there needed to be a layer of definitions that just wasn't there. So anyway, going to the next slide. Let me just make sure that, okay. What we came to basically here was that I wrote a paper which Compete and I wrote together. Basically, I wrote it for them. And today you can get copies of what they have in the back about how I came to do this, how I came to figure this out. Because I was trying to, again, work with data, work with somebody real, not with, what Altimeter or Web Analytics Demystified, but just or anybody else, but just sit there and actually work with somebody's real data and try to figure out, does any of this stuff work? Why doesn't it work? Why doesn't it, and I realized that you had to know what you wanted to do, and like what Katie was saying earlier today, and what other people are saying, was that you needed like 8 to 12 weeks just to figure out what you wanted to measure in the first place, never mind how to measure it. And so we heard a lot about that today, but I didn't hear anyone actually do much in terms of explaining how you would actually sit down and try to actually do it. And arguably that might be because that's what you pay for. I mean, that's what you're going to be consulting people on. But it seemed to me that if we're going to talk about 8 to 12 weeks, we're going to talk about data, and we're going to talk about social media ROI, how we actually do it. So I worked with Havana Central mostly to find out, I wanted to help my friend who was community manager there to figure out, does the value of social media outreach actually translate into money for the restaurant chain? Does it really work? Could we really track it? And what we found when we did study and work on it, and that's covered in the paper, was that we needed to have goals. In other words, we needed to have a business goal. The business goal obviously is to make money, I guess. Unless Katie tells us the business goal is to really figure out what their goal is and then figure out how to measure it. So we have to figure that out, but then we have to see if we can actually capture the data to capture that. And what I came up with, which I think is different than what I heard echoes of in Katie's and some of the other presentations, is this concept of alignment. that unless the business strategy and the business goals and the metric strategies and the metrics goals are aligned, and I mean closely aligned, not generally aligned. I mean, they have to be aligned in the same way that when you go and do a workout, there's a correct form, and if you don't do it right, you get hurt. Or, you know, if you're a violin player, there's just a certain way to touch that works, you know, and then if we do it other ways, it doesn't work. So I came up with, like, how would you do this? So here's Havana Central, okay, working with somebody's real data who I got permission to talk about it. They have 3 locations in Manhattan. They're not a national chain. There's the featured dish. I had Radiant 6 monitoring. Thank you, Radiant 6, for being generous with me and allowing me to use your data to monitor. So I was monitoring these guys for over a year. And I was getting daily alerts, actually simultaneous alerts a lot of times. You know, at first I was just collecting the data and I didn't think, you know, well, I noticed a lot of people were checking in and saying, you know, I'm in the restaurant, I'm having dinner here, I'm having breakfast here, I'm at a date here, I'm at a meetup here. And, you know, I wondered what we should do with that data. You know, meanwhile, there wasn't anything that Radiant 6 was telling me that I could go back to Jeremy Marin, who's the owner of Havana Central, and say, yeah, Cecilia's work is doing something. It didn't seem like there was any real way for me to use Radiant 6 or the other monitoring tools to actually tell me that the money was being made, or that I couldn't follow it to the cash register. So, but I noticed that more people were checking in, and so at some point, I was talking to Paul Barron, the agent of change, who's a well-known restaurateur, and he told me that he's using HubSpot and some other tools and checking and being able to categorize his franchises by seeing what people are saying that I'm here, and then they can follow up. So I try to do that. Later on that night, I just happened to go by Havana Central. I was getting my email alert from Radiant 6, and it said this lady, Kimberly 188 or whatever, was in the restaurant and having a drink. She was just saying she was having a drink, and I said to my friend, you know what? Why don't we give her drinks? You know, why don't we just give her a free drink because she's here? So Radiant 6 had actually given me the power to know this person was in there as long as they tweeted. And if I was in a position to act on it, I could have given them a drink. And I wanted to know what would that do for me if I gave them a drink. And, you know, ultimately, this lady never came back again, at least as far as I can tell. She didn't tweet. But she said after she tweeted right afterwards that it was her new favorite place. So I thought, wow, that's great. We just give her a drink because we know that she's there. And she says it's my new favorite place. So I mean, what's that worth? Not much if she doesn't come back again. But it looked pretty nice at the time. So basically, I thought, wow, if we could only do this, then I kind of figured out, well, what's the ROI of that? We know that open table reservations for Havana Central is 3.6 people is the average reservation size. We know that the average order is $186. The average meal is about $51.66. We know that people, when they tweet that they're there, we know that likely they're not alone. And because they're in a restaurant, we know they're going to buy something. They're going to buy a drink. They're probably going to buy dinner. So it's probably fair to say that even if I can't prove that this person wouldn't have come here, you know, they would have been here, that a tweet could be worth like $120. It could be. I can't prove it because I can't follow the money to the cash register, but it could be. And of course, you could figure out what a tweet's worth in any kind of location based on the kind of transactions that happen in that location, and then figure out, well, what's the value of that? But my point being, or the point that people might make to me was that, you know, well, this person might have come here anyway, so they were tweeting anyway. But then I thought, well, it's not really about them coming, it's about their friends seeing, and about, you know, them being more likely to come. And how would we record that, you know? So with that, it's actually Kimberly 819, and she posted on Chilling with My Girl, in the city. We gave her the drink, and she said, great. You know, so like I thought, well, that's what we should do. We should give, you know, everybody a drink who says they tweet there, right? And then maybe next year would be everyone who has a certain dish you want to promote. But the problem was that the waiters and the waitresses, and they don't, first of all, they don't have anything to write down this stuff on. Number two, they're too busy, and there's no incentive for them to really go out of their way to do this. So, and then it wasn't a clear message from Jeremy, really, that he really was focused on this. So here's where I started getting the concept that the business strategy and the business goals and the metric strategies and the metrics goals needed to be combined, and they need to be really aligned tightly. And obviously that wasn't the place, because they're a small business, right? Like they're this small kind of business that we heard about earlier. They might have been prepared to spend $30,000 or $40,000 a year on social media, mostly for a community manager, but they're not really willing to, and they probably don't even want to buy Radiant 6. I mean, maybe even that's too much for them, although they like the alerts, by the way. They're better than the other ones they were getting from, you know, that I can set up from other platforms that are free. But the point being that we had no process in place to act on this. So even though the technology could tell me that someone's in a location right now and I should act on it, I had no capability to act on it because the people weren't there yet. And that's kind of what I'm hearing echoing, that technology jumped much faster than the ability of the people to actually act on the data. So now they're trying to figure out, well, you know, I want to prove social media ROI and I want to put money into it, but I can't see the money go into the cash register, which is where I really need to see it. And then there's this guy, the brand builder, that's saying, you know, pretty much that return on investment is not the same as me. If I say that that tweet's worth $120, as I understand it, that's just my estimation. I can't prove it, and I can't prove it. You know, so there are people who really do have the money, but they want to see the proof, and the proof is just not here yet. So it's a kind of catch-22. They don't want to spend the money. B2B doesn't want to spend the money, especially because they want to see some good case studies of something that works, and they never see anything that works that well. So here's what happened, really. Basically, I took all that Radiant 6 data, and I created a table, and I looked at my top people, which is over here, and how many times. I guess it doesn't really show up too well. Sorry about the sound here. It doesn't show up that well. But I saw how often people came in. And as I looked at this, I kind of thought, okay, I see velocity here. I see people who come in more often. But I have no CRM. I have no way of contacting these people. I mean, I might know that they're coming in, but I have no way to reach out to them easily, keep track of them, to, you know, ask them why they came, automatically segment them when they come a certain number of times, and then give them certain kind of rewards, tie in couponing with it. So where the technology could work, it just didn't, because what Radiant 6 provided was a partial solution. It could tell me that people were there, but it couldn't do anything about really following up with them. I mean, I could manually follow up with them, but it couldn't automatically segment them the way I wanted to. None of the tools do. That's the reality. You know, and there's nothing for them to write down, you know, stuff on in a lot of cases. No software, no middleware. So I saw that. I also saw that there were, again, broken business processes and measurements goals. You know, one case was, you know, the community manager generating a social media